What if your legacy is not just a throwaway word, but rather an opportunity to have some deeper conversations? I'd like to welcome David to the Design Your Legacy podcast this lovely morning. Welcome, David.
Angelina, it's a pleasure to be here.
It's my honor to host you, and you're joining today from Quebec. Is that correct? In Montreal?
We are international today. You are in California, and I'm in Montreal, Canada. That's absolutely correct. We're going to design legacies internationally, globally.
Wonderful, wonderful. Would you share a little bit with the listeners about your background professionally and or personally before we jump into the topic today regarding what you know regarding executors and the whole gambit?
Well, I've been in the financial planning industry for over 35 years. I'm a certified executive advisor, and I got into this area of estate and legacy planning based on my family situation, which took 7 years, 10 court appearances, and $50,000 in lawyers' fees to settle their estate. And my parents had a will. So, all the personal turmoil, all the trouble that we went through, it also led me to a life and health crisis. I ended up having triple bypass surgery from the stress. And so I made it my mission I didn't want other families to go through what I went through. So during COVID, I wrote the book Executor Help: How to Settle an Estate, Pick an Executor, and Avoid Family Fights.
Yes. Well, I think the knowledge around being an executor is really important. We're going to get into that in a moment because I know a few things about trust, but let's start with the problem. I want to agitate the problem a little bit. So, is it the lack of knowledge? Is it the lack of preparation regarding the presumptions that people make? Or is it the lack of truly understanding human nature?
It's the lack of people being prepared to have the conversation to do anything. Most people either avoid, procrastinate, or they'll be apathetic, saying, "I'm dead. What will it matter?"
Hmm.
And when it comes to legacies and families, there's going to be three types of families. The family that's going to bury their head in the sand and say, "Oh, no one's ever going to die in our family." Spoiler alert, it's going to happen to all of us. There's going to be the family say, "Yeah, well, we have a will, and don't you worry about it." And then what happens is when something does happen and there's been no conversations, they let the paperwork do the talking for them. And then there's the family that truly is cohesive, the family that wants to pass on traditions and values to the next generation. And that's the family that's going to have conversations and family meetings.
Yes. And I know that you have shared, as you're in Canada, that 55 to 60% of Canadians don't have a will or an estate plan. I imagine the numbers are very similar in the United
Yeah,
States. And so,
actually, it exactly in the US, we break it down in terms of that was percentages, but recent studies have come out. There's 152 million Americans that don't have a will or an estate plan, and in here in Canada, it's 15 million Canadians don't have a will or an estate plan.
oh, interesting. Well, I know the population, for example, in Southern California is equal to that of the entire country of Canada, I've heard.
Yeah, well, you guys are big. We're right next door, and but when it comes to this particular subject, we're exactly the same. It doesn't matter
Um,
which side of the border you're on. There's a lack of um, uh, planning when it comes to state and legacy planning, just by the basic steps by having a will, and that's the problem because over the next 10 years, we're going to see the largest wealth transfer in our lifetime. It's going to be over $10 trillion that's going to be transferred. And families aren't prepared. They haven't prepared for this. And that's why we have a lot of family fights. That's why our courts are filled with families fighting over businesses, cottages, money,
yeah,
properties.
I was going to get to that in a moment. You said that oftentimes, and I want to start again with the problem. Many people today, they'll say, as you just mentioned, they'll say, "I'll be dead, so I'll make it someone else's problem," or "I'm not ready to die yet." And so there's that procrastination piece, or just the complete avoidance of putting it on to the next generation in terms of them then wanting to figure this out. So again, there's not that fight over the cottage.
Correct. So, but for someone to say, "Well, I'm not ready to die yet," nobody knows when it's going to happen. It can happen at any time. I have a friend of mine, a couple. They had a business and they worked very hard. And just recently they put the business up for sale. And during the time of the sale, the husband was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease. And now he's since passed because it's been a couple of months ago. And now everything that he worked for, he didn't expect that he'd sell off his business and, he was a car collector and loved to travel. He didn't ever get to do that. So you never know when your time is going to come. So you need to be prepared at all times. Because basically, to do the estate planning, which is the more technical things in terms of talking about distribution of your assets after you're gone, you need to figure out how am I not going to leave disorganization and chaos for my family. So that's why you have to be, don't take the thought and procrastinate saying, well, I'm not ready to die yet. Nobody's ready to die yet. I'm not ready to die yet.
Yeah, I think you have coined it the biggest love letter to your family that you can give.
It is. It is the biggest love letter that you can give. Through my loss, I've seen through legacy that the biggest legacy that we can leave is not going to be measured in how much money we have or what the possessions we have. It's going to be about the confidence and the conversations that we can instill in the people that we love by having the conversations that we dread and by having those conversations now.
Yeah, you've also said there's what you leave, and then it's how you leave others emotionally. And I thought that was a very good distinction.
Yeah, because a lot. Again, you're leaving behind a lot of as much as someone's going to grieve that you're gone, you need to think about how are you going to leave them? Do you want to leave them a legacy where they're going to remember you? Do you want to be remembered for what you didn't do, or do you want to leave them a mess? And the biggest mess that you can leave is not even having an estate plan, not having a will. Actually, you do have a will and estate plan. Doesn't matter if you're in Canada or in the US. If you don't have a will, you can die intestate. And believe me, the government has a plan for you, and you can only imagine how that plan's going to go for you because you won't get to have a say of how you want your assets or who you want your assets, or if you have your children, who do you want them to be their guardians. So you can take control and prepare the next generation by having leaving a legacy and not a legacy and a mess.
Yeah, I think you've spoken about the disorganization that comes with the lack of preparation up front, and that is what the family members are left with to have to sort. In fact, I was just having a conversation the other day with a family member of mine, and they have had to wear 10 different hats, from selling the house to cleaning up and to learning the laws of that particular state. I mean, and when it shows up on one's doorstep, it's right there. And if no one else is volunteering, it then falls on somebody to step forward. But let me agitate the problem some more. So if somebody doesn't have a will, this is before I even get to the executors not being prepared. You've brought up the question of then who will pay the bills. So if there's a piece of real estate and it's locked up in court, and there's a leaky roof to that apartment or that investment property, then all of a sudden the those bills
Well,
might not get paid. The maintenance might not
the
happen.
bills
Same
may
more.
the bills may not get paid because at first I was going to be caught up in court because then the courts have to find someone who's going to be the administrator or who somebody's going to be the executor of the estate. Suppose nobody steps up.
Yeah,
So
you
then
call this the domino effect. Keep going.
so yeah, so no one steps up. So bills aren't being paid. Um, it could affect mortgages aren't being paid, all of those sort of things. So everything comes to a grinding halt. And then if you add into the problem of digital assets, which are all your logins and passwords, if you haven't got a plan for that, for every email address, there's at least 130 different digital identities to that. So that's your Facebook, Amazon, those sort of things there. If you don't have a plan, there's no will. It's not only the problems of paying the bills, but you've also got your social media accounts that could be hacked if someone knows that you've passed away, or you've got your banking information, or payments are going through, and there's not enough money. And once the banks know that someone has passed away, the accounts are going to be frozen. So everything it just sort of snowballs into an effect of problems that's going to be left behind for your family members.
Yeah, I think you've shared that one place to start is the will regarding what are the directions, what are the wishes, what are the instructions, giving the thoughts to the tax situation. And that is one place to start. But again, so I don't want to leave it just doom and gloom to the listener, but that's one place they can jump in and be constructive compared to, again, having nothing there and then having to have the government babysit, which we all know if the government's writing the contract, they're going to write it in their favor.
Yeah, they'll write into your favor, and it's not going to go the way you want. So people shouldn't use the excuse, well, it's going to be expensive. I don't know if I have enough. That's only for rich people. Those are the common excuses people have that they don't have a will. But if you've got any sort of assets, you've got a car, you've got some money in the bank, you've got some CDs, you've got, you've got some assets, you have an estate. So you need to make sure that it's taken care of. Now, again, you can go to a lawyer and then you can, speak with a professional, or there are online solutions that can help you create your own will it won't in a matter of minutes. At least it's a starting point. At least you have something. If you don't have anything, that's where the problems are going to become a problem.
Sure, absolutely. Well, silence can be acquiescence. And then the other people say, well, David didn't tell me that he wanted the executor to be his children or something like that.
The
Okay.
guardian, yeah.
Yeah. So let me shift over for a moment to executors and they're being prepared well enough. Um, I know that you've mentioned something called the triangle of conflict. There can be the no will, then there can be siblings who don't get along, there can be additional marriages. So speak to me for a moment about how executors can start to better prepare themselves so they don't walk into a world of litigation or not realizing how much they have to manage other people's expectations of, when am I going to get mine?
Right. Well, the first thing you have to understand is if you take on the job, first off, this is the worst job you could ever ask for, being an executor. Most people either don't know they're being an executor or they take on the job as the a one big giant favor to somebody and they take it on as a sense of pride. But 90% of most people have no idea what's involved. It usually takes anywhere between 18 to 24 months or even to settle an estate or up to 100 hours. And during that time, you're going to have to deal with the tax department, beneficiaries. There's so many different outlets that you have to be taking care of, accounts that you have to shut down, the banks they have to deal with. So if you take on the job of executor, you have to understand exactly what you're taking on and the responsibility. Now, if you're setting up your state, then you need to do the best you can to prepare your executor the best you can so that they don't become legally liable because of lack of preparation that and the planning that you put in place for them, and also the stress because there's the family drama of being an executor that they may or may not be part of, but it's just drama that they don't need in their lives. And you're asking them to do all of this during working hours to settle this estate. So I always say try to the bare minimum that you have an accountant, a lawyer, and a financial advisor that you can point your executor in that direction to help them get things done. But on average, you're going to use even more professionals, a real estate agent, an auctioneer. There's so many different professionals that you're going to have to use. But again, use start with the basics: accountant, lawyer, and a financial advisor as a team that's going to help the executor settle the estate.
Yes. And I might add a legacy coach or a legacy advisor also to that mix. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I just think about the emotional aspects. Again, there's an emotional element that not just that it can be taxed on a person, but they're going to be required to have a higher level of emotional intelligence to navigate this process. I mean, really stepping up to, like you had said, to deal with all the personalities involved, not just the personalities of their family, but if they're dealing with officers at the bank and understanding that the funeral director, then gives notice to social insurance up there in Canada or Social Security in America. So it's a very transformative process,
It's
I
a
would
it's
think.
a like I said, it's a huge job. Most people have 90% of most people don't have the capacity to understand what the responsibility is. Again, they take it on as a one big giant favor to somebody, um, and it's a sense of pride, but they really don't know what they're getting themselves into. So you want to be as prepared as best you can.
Yes. I think you've mentioned that people get along until there's the split of the inheritance and the dynamics change forever. Would you speak into this for a moment? Because I think that sometimes people don't think about this. They think, oh, it's just some paperwork. And they have
No,
no,
well, I'll use myself as an example. Um, I wasn't sitting in a courtroom. I had my heart was sinking as I listened to two lawyers and a judge to determine the fate of my parents' assets that none of us held on to in the end. And um, where my parents fell down was they didn't have the conversation with the three of us. I mean, my parents had their will done in my office. I always knew there was a will. I didn't. I knew it was going to be split three ways, but and you would figure three kids split three ways. What could be more fair than equal? But there's always one, and you really don't know about somebody until you have to share an inheritance with them. And I had a sibling that thought, no, they should get more and they did a lot of things to try to manipulate my parents, a surviving parent, because I lost both my parents to cancer within a year of each other. So when one passed away, the other sibling now started to work on them to try and change the will in their favor. So again, you wouldn't think of a person that you grew up with um, would do this. You figure, okay, it's split three ways. We should be good. But it time and time again, you find people will change when there's an inheritance. They just lose their minds. It's baffling. Every time I have a conversation or tell people about it, someone will tell me about a family that's broken down because there was no conversation and there was miscommunication or no communication, and we end up with fights. And a lot of times it ends up having to go to court. In my case, 7 years.
so it's interesting because on one hand, there's this theme of entitlement, but on the other hand, there's a theme of almost, I don't want to say not having a backbone, but it does require some amount of courage to confront, let's say, adult children to say, well, in this scenario, equal's got to be fair, even if you think you're entitled to more. Because if that parent doesn't have that conversation, you're right, then after they pass, I mean, I know you had talked about emotional wishes, and some parents will say, well, after I go, I'd like all of my children to get together for all the holidays. But if that's not the reality after the parents pass and the glue, the invisible glue that holds the family together, disappears, then it's almost behooves the parent to have that conversation earlier on. But you're right, sometimes the parent might not even know what's coming around the corner
Well, you're absolutely right. My parents passed away in 2011, and we haven't spent the holidays together since then.
with the
So
children,
once
the adult
me, so
children.
yeah, yes, the three of us haven't spent the holidays together, and that's my parents were the glue, and you would assume, and I remember, and this is how the sort of the idea for the book came. It was I'm sitting there in the courtroom, and I get, like I said, I'm listening to lawyers and a judge determine the fate of my parents' assets, and I remember thinking to myself, these people were never at Christmas dinner. Who are these people? Why are they deciding what's going on? I'm figuring my mom and dad are probably turning in their graves because we have strangers telling us how things should go in the family. And as I said, where the my parents fell down, I mean, they were great people. I miss their voices every day, but the where they should have stepped up is to um, say this is the way it's going to be. Now,
And their wish also, I'd like my children to continue to communicate and the bond to stay intact.
you would hope, and that's where, but families, they're messy. So you might hope, as the matriarch and the patriarch might hope that they're going to that the love and the the bonds will continue after they're gone. End of the day, they're messy. Families are messy, and if I didn't like when I was years old, I'm gonna still not gonna like you when I'm 40 years old or 50 years old because we're still kids at heart. We just see mom and dad and whatever sibling rivalries there are, they're always going to be there. So it's not going to change because we're supposed to be adults and should know better and we're family. It's I've seen a lot of families because of lack of preparation, they break down because there is silence. But we can break this cycle of silence. We can prepare and prepare, talk about, and get ready how to handle death. But if we don't do that, we end up with, like we have today, a lot of families in court fighting over assets,
And everyone's in it
things.
for themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to just plug coaching and mediation and facilitators once again, because I think if there can be a neutral third party that can come in, there can be a lot of healing. Some of these issues can just come to the surface. I know there's a Canadian psychologist, Dr. Jordan Peterson, that speaks about sometimes parents don't like their children and sometimes children don't like their parents. But I think if there can be that, dare I say, come to Jesus moment where some of these issues can just come to the surface and heal, the whole entire family and generations to follow will be better for it.
You would hope. We did go through the mediation process. I am a big fan of that, love it, and it did help. But again, mediation was the last, what I would say is, in our case, was jumping off the cliff because the next day and a half we were about to go for a final decision, but we had wanted to do mediation. So you and the only reason why you go to court because everybody wants their day in court. Unfortunately, going to court is not like a an episode of Law and Order. It's not going to be over in 48 minutes. It's long, it's arduous, and it's costly. So you have to make the decision because we all want to be right. And we think
Mm,
that if we just get in front of the judge, they're going to see how stupid the other side is. I just got to explain my case. And everybody wants to be right. And at some point, the only people that are benefiting from this is the lawyers. So if you
absolutely.
can have, as you said, come the Jesus moment, then hopefully the amount of money wasted won't go to the lawyers. Have some common sense. But again, you really don't know about somebody until you have to share an inheritance with them, and you don't know if they're willing to blow their own brains out, so to speak, to go to court and just to be right. And at the end of the day, family's broken, and we have less of the estate that was left to us because we've paid that out in lawyers' fees.
Thank you for sharing your realistic story. What does the word legacy mean personally to you?
Um, to me, a legacy isn't what you leave people, but how you leave them. So I
Mm,
hope to leave my son, and now I've got a granddaughter. I hope to leave them a um, a little bit of what my mom and dad taught us in terms of values and how to be good people and try to serve others. I've written a legacy letter to my son, gave it to him last Christmas, so he's kept that. And I wrote, what I love about him, things that him now being a father, what he needs to, from my views of what he should be doing, and I hope to do the same thing, right, for my little 2-year-old granddaughter. I'll write a legacy letter, so there's going to be a keepsake so my voice will always be heard when I'm not going to be here anymore.
that's beautiful. That's beautiful. What would you say are three or four of your core values or guiding principles?
Um, Serve others, be good to um, be good to your family and friends, and also enjoy life. And I learned to enjoy life because of this episode that I went through. There I was having open heart bypass surgery. It took place during we were doing court sessions, and they told me I had to have a triple bypass surgery. That was in November. We're going back to court in January. I said, well, let me just take time out to do triple bypass surgery in November. I should be okay by December. But they pushed it off after that because of my what I had to go through medically. But it made me think of as they were rolling me into the operating room. I had a picture of my son under my pillow because I didn't know if I would come out. That what's important. And again, serve others, be good to the people that are your friends that are really important to you, and also just laugh and love and enjoy life.
So I'm hearing values around family, love, gratitude.
And friends, that's all.
Hmm.
Like I said before, the biggest legacy that you're going to leave is not going to be money or possessions. It's going to be how do you leave people? Um, yeah, how are we going to leave them? And what are they going to think about you when you're not there? Because they're going to be sad, but you always, when they think about you, will they be happy? Will it bring a smile to them? Will I be able to pick up a letter and read their words again?
Yes. Yeah. One thing that I think is interesting is the story of the Canadian. There's a Canadian couple, Celine Dion, when her husband passed, Renee, he took care of
Right.
everything from A to Z. So it made it easier on her.
Absolutely. And that's ideally what a family unit should be looked shoot towards. And as famous as Celine is, you've had other celebrities who didn't have that situation, where they didn't plan properly. You have the problems with the estate of Michael Jackson. You have the problem of the gentleman who I can't remember his name. He played Black Panther. He died without a will. I can't remember his name. Um, but it doesn't matter. Again, the size of the estate or who you are. It's the decision to make to have a plan, not only to have a plan from A to Z, but also have the conversations with those you leave behind.
Including those emotional wishes. If you were to set aside a weekend or two a month to design a hardcover coffee table book, what images and stories would fill its pages?
Maybe pictures of my parents.
Sure, sure. It's going to be your hardcover coffee table book. What's going to be in it?
Well, my parents, and because I know I'm going to leave as part of my legacy for my granddaughter, so she can see who they are, who they were, and what kind of people they are. Tell their stories. Let her learn about a great grandmother who was one of the funniest people. That's where all the sense of humor comes from in the family. It's from my mom, and let her learn about how hardworking both of my parents were.
Oh, I think that's wonderful. That's so good. And I did share with you in the preamble that when I looked at some of the other podcasts, you have quite a good sense of humor after having gone through all of this. Yes.
Well, humor's the only thing we've got. I mean, we're all going through tough times, but everybody loves to laugh.
Yeah.
And we're fortunate wherever we're living. Things people have got it worse than we do. And that's what I try to do on my podcast. It's just not only about talking about estate planning and legacy planning. It's also hearing people's stories who've gone through grief and how they try to help others. And it's also about living, about how can you live to 100? What are the things that make a happy life? Because I assume we're only going through this life one time. So let's try and make the best of it.
Yes. Thank you so much for being a guest today. We set out our intention of what if your legacy is not just a throwaway word, but rather an opportunity to have some deeper conversations. And I think we fulfilled that business promise. So thank you so much for being a guest on this show today.
Thank I thank you for taking the time to have me on. I appreciate it so much.
My pleasure.